Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Beating Baseball the Old-Fashioned Way, the video series where we talk about how to beat DFS baseball without a projection system or without an algorithm. We've talked a lot about the ways in which you can find great hitting plays to get an edge on the field in these videos, but not much about pitching. Picking the right pitcher is actually incredibly important in DFS baseball, especially on FanDuel where their scoring is disproportionately higher than hitters. What I mean by this is hitters on average get about 3 points per $1,000, while pitchers on average are more around 4.5 points per $1,000. This means picking the best pitcher can increase your score a lot more than finding the best hitting play of the night. Crunching all the numbers to find the best pitching plays can be tough without a lot of baseball experience, I admit. Luckily, my friends at FantasyLabs have an amazing tool that can speed up this process tremendously and help us quite a bit in finding those great FanDuel pitcher plays every day. Now, sadly, this tool isn't free. It's part of FantasyLabs Pro membership. Luckily, you can try Pro for 5 days for only about $15 if you just want to test the waters, and there's a link you can click on below for you to get that deal. Honestly, I'd recommend just signing up long-term because you'll get your money's worth out of these tools, but hopefully in this video I can convince you that it is worth it, even if you're just using these tools for baseball. So to show you what stats I value in pitchers on FanDuel, I'm going to basically make my own model using FantasyLabs Player Models page, which is a really awesome page which allows you to weight the specific stats that you want to weight in order to find the best pitchers of the day. So one thing you can do is you can just go to their Players Model page if you're a member and look at just CSU Rams model, who's a great daily fantasy baseball player, and you basically trust what he has to say. But if you want to trust more what I have to say, we're going to create our own model, and it's actually probably going to be pretty similar to CSU Rams. So what I'm going to do is add a model. I'm going to call it Max's FanDuel model. And I'm going to start from scratch and create my own weights. And by doing so, not only am I going to give you sort of a model to use, which is great, but also I just really want to show you why I'm choosing these different stats, because that is obviously very important for you to understand. So the first thing is on FanDuel, there's 3 stats that you can, or 4 stats that you can score on. You get 3 points for an inning pitched, 3 points for a strikeout, you get 12 points for the win, and you get -3 points if your pitcher gives up an earned run. So one thing is innings pitched, although they are a significant portion of the stats that you get, most pitchers are gonna get around 6 to 7 innings pitched if they do well. And so it's going to be a little hard to predict the fluctuations of that. So because of that, strikeouts are going to be really king. And I'll get into why the win and earned runs are not as important. But we really want to have a pitcher that's going to get a lot of strikeouts. So the first thing we're going to do is simply give a lot of weight to a pitcher that strikes out people a lot. And luckily, FantasyLabs has all these numbers. They're their own numbers. This isn't Steamer, which might regress a little bit more than FantasyLabs. I think they use recent or value recent numbers a little bit more. But basically, I'm going to give a lot of weight to the fact that the pitcher is a strikeout pitcher. So I'm going to give it 35 out of the 100 points. Obviously a lot, but we want to find guys who are going to get a lot of strikeouts. Another thing is we want to weight whether the pitcher is good or not as well, even though strikeouts are the most important. And I find the best way to do this is just by going by bargain rating a little bit, because these sites are really good at basically rating the pitchers using the salaries. And so if and bargain rating is basically the difference between DraftKings and FanDuel salary. So if DraftKings thinks the pitcher's salary is really high, and they're usually very aggressive with their algorithm, it probably means that the pitcher is pretty good. So I'm going to give bargain rating some weight, and I'm also going to give whip some weight, just because it's just a good indication of if the pitcher is good or not. So basically 50% of our model is going to be, is the pitcher pretty good, and is he a strikeout pitcher? And actually maybe maybe I'll give a little more to bargain rating, because this really is, I mean, basically, is the pitcher good is the question that is going to be the most helpful with getting us fantasy points here. So the second thing is I want a pitcher that's in a good strikeout matchup. So FantasyLabs has two stats that help with this, and that's opposing offense's strikeout rate, and that's just the overall strikeout rate of the lineup, and then also strikeout prediction percentage, which I like a little better because it takes into account where hitters are in the lineup, and I think it also takes into account the handedness of the hitters. It matters where the hitters are in the lineup because, for example, if you have a high strikeout hitter in the top of the order, it means that pitcher is likely going to face that guy 3 times, maybe even 4. Whereas if it's in the bottom of the order, he's almost certainly only going to face that guy twice. So I'm going to give about 15 points to strikeout prediction percentage, and I'm going to give 5 points to, well, actually, I'm going to give 20 points to a strikeout prediction percentage. And I'm only going to give 5 points to opposing team strikeout right now. And my reason is FantasyLabs numbers this early in the season, I think, are based a lot on recent performance. And I think their numbers are slightly off because of that. I think they're going to get better as the weeks go on. But for example, with David Price, they have the Orioles at a strikeout per at bat of 0.22, which is really low. And I would actually rate them with a really high strikeout per at bat. And so I don't think their numbers are great right now. But it seems actually that strikeout prediction percentage, taking handedness into account, actually helps with this quite a bit. So I'm going to weight that a lot more than opposing team strikeout percentage. But as the year goes on, I'm going to make this a little more even. So now we've actually used 80 of our 100 points, which just goes to show how much I value the strikeout. Having a good strikeout matchup and being a strikeout pitcher is basically all that matters on FanDuel. And some people might argue that the win is incredibly important, and I'd actually disagree with them here. And my reasoning is that the win is important if you get it, because it's worth about 12 FanDuel points. That's about 3 or 4 strikeouts. But the issue is, it's 4 strikeouts. Yeah, 4 strikeouts. So it's worth about 4 strikeouts. But the issue is the percent chance of winning from pitcher to pitcher is not going to fluctuate all that much, especially with pitchers you're considering. For example, I think with David Price, he's a negative 190 favorite, whereas, let's say, Steven Matz is a negative 159. So obviously, Price is a significantly bigger favorite, or even Max Scherzer is negative 224, so let's compare them. Even though Scherzer is a significantly bigger favorite than Matz, I would say this number probably indicates that Scherzer is going to win 55 or 60% of the time, and Matz is going to win about 50% of the time. So the difference in expected points between a player, let's say, who's going to win 60% of the time and one that's going to win 50% of the time is only about 1 FanDuel point. It's not that much. And the other issue with valuing this so much is what ends up happening is you are just going to be picking the guys that everyone else is picking because most people value a hitter or a pitcher that's a big favorite because they think the win is so valuable. So if you actually use guys who are not as big favorites, you can actually get an edge by using someone who's less used in GPPs, especially a guy who, like, for example, Jose Quintana, who actually is just a slight favorite on the road. Most people won't even consider using him because they say, oh, he's not going to get the win, I don't like him. But in fact, his chance to get the win actually is pretty high and not that much different than Scherzer's. So anyways, as an aside, I just wanted to get into that. And so I actually don't assign that much weight to Vegas score. The other thing I'm not going to assign that much weight to is park factor, even though I think it's incredibly important in DFS baseball. And the reason is on FanDuel, you don't get negative points for walks and hits. And so a park where players are going to get hits more just doesn't matter that much, although obviously we don't want guys to get home runs. So I'm going to give park factor just 5 points. Plus minus, I'm not going to give it any points because it's too early in the season. And weather, I just don't think matters. So I'm just going to go down the line. EV diff score, HH diff score. these are trends that I just don't know if they matter that much, so I'm not going to put weight to them. And one thing that's going to actually be helpful is, and especially later this season, is pitch speed diff score. I love that they have the stat, because pitchers who are throwing harder as of late usually means that they've had an improvement in their mechanics. So right now, this isn't going to be that helpful. I'm going to give it 5 points anyway. But I think it will be helpful later in the season. I might value it more. Pro temps rating, I don't really care for. And consistency and long-term value, we don't really care for, because we're not talking about long-term value and consistency. We're talking about GPPs, and we want upside. So I'm going to give my last 5 points to upside. So now we've used all 100 points, and we've basically created a model. So now I'm going to see what has come of our model's creation. And what FantasyLabs now does is it takes our model, and except there's some glitch here. Hold on one second. Sometimes it does this. I don't know why. So we're just going to update, and we're going to update. Okay. So now one thing is it gives me a number of the average plus minus of the pitchers who fall under this model historically. And plus minus is just how much above expectation a pitcher is doing. So we got about 4.32 points, which is a great number. And I think CSV Ram's model is maybe 3.5. So, there you go. Calling you out, CSV Ram. So now FantasyLabs is going to organize this into a rating. And this is really great because now we can just see who are the best pitchers. And as you can see, my favorite pitchers are just the guys who are really the best. David Price, Max Scherzer, Steven Matz, and John Lester, who are all the high-quality pitchers. And so you can just look at the stats that are weighting. So, and here's my issue with, and this is why opposing team strikeouts, I didn't weight that much. I saw an issue with the Orioles, who FantasyLabs has at about 2.22 strikeouts per bat. And I think as the season goes on, that's going to raise to much higher, maybe even closer to 0.3. But luckily, with strikeout prediction percentage, I think it takes into account handedness and spot in the order much more. So I think he got a little more of a boost from that. So one thing you might be surprised by if you've been playing baseball for a while is that David Price is over Max Scherzer. And I actually agree with this. And the reason you might be surprised is people love targeting Atlanta for pitchers because their lineup is just such a weak hitting lineup. But the issue is they actually don't strike out that much per at bat, only about 0.22. There are a lot of guys that just don't strike out. And so if Scherzer is facing a team that's not going to strike out that much, he's just not going to get as many strikeouts as we like. The other thing is Atlanta has a lot of lefties, and with Scherzer facing a lot of lefties, that just even lowers his chance even more of not striking out guys. So guys like Eric Ibar, Freddie Freeman, Nick Markakis, AJ Persinski, Jace Peterson, they don't make you shudder or anything, but these guys are actually really low strikeout guys, and that's going to hurt us quite a bit when we want to play a guy like Scherzer, who's going to be really highly owned. That being said, he's still my highest rated player, and I love him, and I actually would definitely use him in cash because I think he's the least volatile. But you actually might want to favor David Price more, who has a lot of upside in this matchup versus Baltimore, but people might be scared away because he's not as big a favorite as Scherzer, and Baltimore has been winning games and their lineup is not as good. So we also get guys like Steven Matz, a guy who's great consideration, John Lester, and then we also get guys that you might not even think to consider, but are actually rated highly, like guys like Jose Quintana, who has a really great strikeout matchup, and Nick Trapano, who's a young guy who actually strikes out players quite a bit, and also Aaron Nola. So in the end, my model really favors the high salary guys who are the best pitchers, which I agree with. And this day, there's not any shocks, but you actually on future days might find some shocks. And actually, one thing we can do is actually go to the day tab and look at a future date, and maybe we can see if my model has any surprises. Except it just deleted everything. So we're not going to be able to do that. Oh no, and it's online DraftKings. So anyways, okay, we're not going to be able to do that. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to completely sign up for FantasyLabs and completely copy my model. I don't really care, honestly. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Again, if you want to sign up for FantasyLabs and get that $15 free trial, you can sign up at the link below. And as always, please subscribe to the Daily Fantasy Winners YouTube page if you want to be alerted when I get these videos. And if you have any questions, you can go on Twitter at MaxJSteinberg. Thank you so much for watching, and good luck with your lineups.